Yeah, so I didn't know if I had enough change for the meter.
Yeah.
So I was driving around really slow in the parking lot looking if anything was filled. Like if there was any money.
Yeah.
But then I saw people watching me. I'm like, oh, I look like the crazy person. So I'm just going to dig through my car and find any bit of change.
You're trolling.
Yeah.
Trolling for the...
I was. It didn't work. So I found change.
Hey, everybody needs that time.
Yeah.
Welcome to In the Act, a radio program on process and the creative life. Creativity does not just stop and start with artists. We all make aesthetic or guiding decisions. Our aim is to talk through the process and investigate how we choose to express ourselves and to live creatively. We're connecting with people about their lives, and that's the subject of our show. Broadcasting from Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin on Mead Community Radio, I am Erica Hunsinger, and this is In the Act. And today's guest on In the Act is Whitney Morales.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you, which we'll, I think, dive into. Firstly, can you talk a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. I'm Whitney. I am a professional photographer in family storytelling style, I guess I would say. I don't have this elevator pitch down, so I'm just going to take this very long-winded version.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Here. So I do family photography and then also branding sessions for mostly artists because they're the best. And no, everyone's the best. But I love doing storytelling photography for really anybody and just photographing people in a very authentic way. And I'm also a mother and a wife. I've got 3 kids. And I think, those are my big highlights of my life.
Yeah, totally. Can you break down what you mean by storytelling?
Yeah. I used to say documentary photography because that's what I kind of thought, but I like to get a little more creative. That's very creative. I like to style things a little bit, and that's not specifically documentary. That's all exactly as it is without touching things.
Sure, yep.
But I think I like to have a little different spin on it and style some things and, I don't know, showcase things in a different way sometimes. So I started saying storytelling.
Yeah.
And that just gives us a little bit more room to create the story and tell people's story. And again, this isn't okay, only families or only brands. I approach weddings as a storytelling photographer.
Cool.
And everything I do, I love finding the people in the story and then showcasing them and showcasing all of the resources that they use. That's in families too. What things do they like to do together and photographing those fine details of their experience together and not just smiling faces always.
Right. So that would be sort of, so if I can also try and understand photography of family, if they're just set up and taking pictures almost I don't know, a Sears portrait or something. That's one version of snapshot. And then a documentary photograph would be more
true documentary style is everything's authentic. Nothing has changed.
So
lighting,
in the moment poses, not poses, but as they're moving, taking photographs and stuff like that, that would be more documentary.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of am a little bit in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to say storytelling. And that's the whole point for me of any photo session I approach. I want to just authentically tell a story of this person, this family, this couple, this artist, whatever it is, because specifically, this is the why. And I guess maybe I should have started with that. But
no, this is what happens. This is what we do.
Maybe I'm writing my elevator pitch right now.
Yeah, here we go.
10 years in, and I'm finally figuring it out on this podcast.
Yeah, conversations, man. Yeah.
So in any like realm of photography or just anything we do, like there's millions of people doing the same thing, or there's, families that can all kind of pose there and smile. And that just is a lot of sameness. And I think in, approaching it differently, telling like your story, whoever I would be working with, gives more of an authentic documentation of them. And like if somebody is paying me, hiring me to photograph them, I really don't want their photograph to look basically like everyone else's. I want the content I create for them, I want it to look like only them and tell their story specifically. So with branding sessions, that really works beautifully because, we're in this era of social media and a lot of us are marketing ourselves, in that format.
Totally. Yeah.
And again, that can be really hard to not try to mimic someone else that you deem successful or whatever.
Sure.
But gosh, so much of that is happening. And then you just kind of turn into one of the masses. But if you can put imagery out there, I guess I'm talking through the lens of, an entrepreneur or whatever. If you can put your imagery out there, like your content that you create for your business in a storytelling way, that will make you stand out. And you might not go viral because I don't know how that happens, but you get to connect with the people that need you, that want you, that you want to work with.
Yeah.
And then like flip that on the lens of like a family session.
Yeah.
I do not, as a mother, I do not need to look back at my kids in poses, in perfect clothes, with their hair styled just right.
Yeah.
That will not trigger anything for me in the future, 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, not a negative trigger, a positive. When I look back at my family portraits, I'm hoping to be triggered back with that memory. I'm hoping to look back and just be jolted in my heart back to that time.
Yeah.
And you just cannot get that when somebody's telling you how to pose, or you're smiling for the camera or whatever. Parents even, it's a little easier for adults to manage our emotions and just turn on that happiness.
Yeah.
But when you look back, like that wasn't real.
Right.
And usually it's like surrounded in this huge layer of stress.
Yes.
And I guess from me experiencing that kind of photo session with my kids when they were very young on the consumer end, I was like, oh my goodness, I never want to have people feel that.
Yeah.
And like, obviously I can't control everybody's emotions. Like, it is a lot to get people ready for, or to get even 5 bodies to a place.
Right.
And that does seem a little bit stressful. But when they're with me, I just really hope they can let down and relax and just connect.
That's so great. Yeah. When you were talking, I totally flashed on a memory of like, we were all dressed up, family portraits of like, I don't know, we got a stranger to take a photo, but we were all so mad. Mm-hmm. Like we were not a happy family at this moment. And as families go through, but that's the jolt that you got me back to. And I think it's really interesting that the storytelling is like pulling these narratives out of the family that's individualized, as well as tuning into like the emotions of how you want something to be experienced, looking back on. Because people want snapshots of in time. This is where we were in time, to document it, right?
I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why people take photos, right?
Yeah.
Of like, this is either monumental time or, let's get this now. Kids grow so quickly, in terms of family portraits. But to capture and to identify that you want the emotion to be there in an authentic way is very different than having them what did you say? Then someone telling them to pose in a particular way, which then is inauthentic to that person.
Yeah.
Which is such a really interesting way of going about creating experiences with the camera.
And I think it's really interesting because now, we're in this digital age where I can snap 500 photos in a 20-minute session. And,
Sure.
And that's okay, and then not that I usually shoot that much, but there was times in my career where it did take that much.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times people, and I will be honest, I get a little sucked into this myself too, as I'm preparing for my family session for as the consumer again.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we're still kind of in that mindset of that we were trained as kids, that okay, we only get 10 pictures from this, or we only get this one shot or whatever, because it was on film back in the day and you did only get that. And other styles of photography, you do get more limited photos because they are portraits, like a posed portrait. But for me, I edit anything that I feel. Like if I look at your photo and I feel something, I'm editing it and it's going to you. Because I can't, for me personally, and again, everybody has their own method and how they work, and that is great. But for me personally, if I have 5 photos that are similar, but there's just 2 that kind of have their own emotion attached to them, but they look similar, I can't be the one to choose.
Right.
Like, I don't know your kid. I don't know if that specific smirk is the thing, know? There are all these fine details with the people that we love that are just things we love about them.
Yeah.
Things when...
Or identify about that. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I'm not going to ever say you get 5 images or you get 20, because I'm telling a whole story, you know? It's not... I don't know. It can't be broken down. You make a film of people and, well, there's many different clips that go together in this film work. Right. And it's similar, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. I love that the emotion is your tuning fork.
Yeah.
For this. It's a really interesting. I don't know if I've heard a photographer talk about it in that specific way. It
comes a little bit challenging sometimes too, because sometimes I'll come across an image that is imperfect by I don't know.
Whatever those standards are.
Yes. But you can just feel it, and I'll just edit it and send it off.
Yeah.
Because it's worth it to me,
Right.
I mean, back in the day when you're working with film, you're just hoping to get a couple in focus, And I think there was a little bit more appreciation for imperfect photography.
Right.
And now it's well, everything better be clear and sharp, lit perfectly, whatever. But when you're following a family telling their story, that story happens where it happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes the lighting is really bad, but you just do your best, and, the image is still worth it in the end.
Right. I love that.
Good.
I was wondering if you could, because you didn't start out being a photographer, in your professional life, right?
No.
So I was wondering if you could kind of scoot back a little bit and talk about how you got to this place, because I think that there's so much value in the process of decision making and key points in your life that were oh, that didn't work, or because I think we can all learn from each other with that. So
yeah, it's been a long and interesting road, and this year is kind of a big milestone for me. It's 10 years in business, and I have my 3 kids, and okay, I'll pump back a little bit. I started diving into photography because I am a true DIYer in all facets of the word, or acronym, I guess. My dad trained me to live that way. That's how we live. We would go to the craft store and we would go somewhere, see something, and he'd be like, oh, we can make that. And so we then go to the craft store and find the things to make the thing, however shabby it might look in the end, but we did it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how my photography was in the beginning.
Yeah.
I got the camera, I did the thing because I had my first daughter and I knew I wanted to document her life. I knew like it wasn't in our budget at the time, like the camera was out of the budget,
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, if I want to do this, I'm going to have to figure it out. And so that I can, document this childhood of hers. And I also ended up going part-time in my job because childcare is insane. And I wanted to be with her. And then I ended up just quitting that entirely because I was able to get enough photo clients on a total whim. It'll be this 10 years this December that I had my first mini session for holidays, and it was totally thrown together. And I did my best, but sessions were a huge price point of $25.
Wow.
Because essentially I used that as like paid training for myself. It just covered the cost of the backdrop and stuff that I'd set up. I didn't like make money, but I was able to provide some decent photos to several families and learn a lot.
Yeah.
So that's how it kind of just started. And then from there, it just kept ramping up year after year. There were pauses. I took a complete year off during COVID.
Yeah.
Mental health matters.
Yeah.
And, it was a hard time to be a photographer. It was a hard time to be anything. But rather than just trying to figure it out and make it work, I'm just like, I'm going to pause this for now.
Yeah.
And which was really great. I don't know, anytime you have an opportunity to pause and reflect on your work is a blessing. And so I had this idea that I wanted to slowly grow my business. And when my youngest was in kindergarten, I wanted to have like a lucrative full-time career for myself because I didn't feel like going back to work in finance. That wasn't me anymore. It wasn't really me 10 years prior either.
Yeah.
That happened this year. Sent my last to kindergarten, and here I am.
Wow.
Yep. Living the dream, guys.
Nice. Cool. Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger, and we are here with Whitney Morales. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we're sort of talking a little bit about like the trajectory of like how things occurred and decisions made and like what feels right. And I think I'll give you the floor on that. But
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take this back prior to 10 years ago. Gosh, let's take it back 20 years ago.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
It's always a little weird to remind myself that I've been out of high school for 20 years this year.
Yeah.
But that's the truth. Here I am. So, in high school, all of us are told we need to go to college. Honestly, I hope kids aren't getting told that anymore. Or, if you have a career path that you need to go to college, you go to college. But I did not know what I wanted to do. But there was all this pressure to decide.
Yeah.
And so I landed on an elementary educator. That would have been something. So I went to 1 year of college for that. And I went to a private school in Ohio. And like, this is a defining moment, as you were asking before.
Yeah.
we watched some kind of documentary on teachers or something, and it was like schools in Ohio, and it was a really rural community, and these computers they were using were like very old at that time. 20 years ago, they were very old. And like they were talking, I don't know what the purpose of this film was, but they were talking about like the facility and like the school building was leaking and stuff. And I'm like watching, I'm like, I don't know how, if this is, and again, this isn't every school experience as a teacher, but I'm like, if this is even one experience, like how am I going to pay? How am I going to get a career as a teacher that they're telling me? Thankfully, they told me. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they tell kids this very often.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, you know, the salary of a teacher. And I'm like, I can't pay for this school if I'm going into this career. And
that's such a hard thing to realize that you don't realize, I don't think, until you're in a program or something.
For sure. And, you know, my parents were doing their best to help.
Yeah.
But gosh, like, I don't know. That's just a lot of money.
Yep.
And so I ended up quitting after 1 year, and still had to pay for that, $10,000.
Right.
And
which is so discouraging.
Yeah.
That's so discouraging. I mean, let's just stop right there. That you actually made the decision to quit, which is one thing. I mean, it's brave to do. Right? It takes courage to be like, this is not for me. I think that's a key moment in people. And I think that people think of quitting sometimes as giving up. And I think that it's really important to identify that that is not exactly it. If it doesn't fit, and to identify it and to edit it out of your life, that is a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's taken me until like a year ago to fully be able to accept that.
Yeah, sure.
I made the right decision.
Right.
I mean, I'll go ahead and tell everybody I never went back to college. That was my plan at the time to go back because that was presented as the only option. So after that, I had to get a job, and I ended up being a bank teller, which I honestly felt like it was a good position back then. And I made $8 an hour.
Yeah.
And then I ended up making, like, within a year, I think it was 8. It ended up being like $11 at some point. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Doesn't that sound funny now, though? Yeah. $11 an hour.
I mean, but yeah.
And it was actually like decent for entry-level position at that time. But yeah, I just kept with that. And I had gone through several different, you know, I did like personal banking. And then my last position in banking, I was in like the underwriting area for small business lending and putting together like business loan packages. So that was really interesting and fun. I did really like that.
What did you like about it?
I loved being able to read people's business plans.
Oh, interesting.
It was so interesting because they're quite in depth most of the time.
And it's about their vision, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're creating something. They want to create something and need your assistance with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So
I feel like that's a through
there's like
line.
a story there, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was probably what am I trying to say? The biggest thing I liked about my job in that industry. And that's where I was when I stopped working. Because, you know, childcare is so expensive.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to have worked part-time and been home part-time, but there's just not really many opportunities to do that.
Right.
Most places you have to put your kid in childcare full-time.
Right.
So I worked for a year until my daughter was 1, and then I had gotten a couple sessions with people, and I had I was making enough that I had replaced my part-time income minus the daycare expenses I was still paying, which wasn't very much. I wasn't making very much either way. And it all just kind of rolled from there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when people are interested in starting a business or maybe not even starting a business, just starting something, just trying something out.
Yeah.
There's this thought process that things have to be perfect before you can present it to the world.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Perfectionism is so hard.
It is. And I am not here saying that I don't deal with it every single day, but gratefully, some part of me is able to just move past that a lot of times because my work was not perfect.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
But, I tried and I kept learning, and literally every skill I learned with photography was something I taught myself.
Yeah.
And my photo session pricing reflected that in the beginning for a very long time.
Yeah.
It was what people say. I always see people on Facebook asking for references for affordable photographer or affordable, whatever it is. And it's like, come on, guys, it's not affordable is relative to your life.
Yep.
And, any skilled person, affordable art, affordable handyman.
Yep.
It's like if you can't perform the service yourself, you have to start placing some value on the person that can.
Right.
And maybe that means you only get your photographs every 3 years because you saved for that or whatever it is for you. But I think this is a little bit different tangent, but I just see it in all the industries. I want this to be affordable. And sometimes you just have to cut other expenses to save for the person's worth.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's just kind of a weird moment we're in, or maybe it's just that we get to read it all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the arts are historically have an deemed unnecessary to everyday living. And I mean, people who are making any sort of object are consistently asked to donate work to causes, which would never, I don't know if it would happen in the same way with like larger businesses, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
It's not necessarily the tax write-off doesn't do us a lot of good in the same way. But I mean, when you're talking about value and, do you feel like in this process of like this transformation, this sort of narrative that you kept creating, and I love the fact that you were that you just tried and taught yourself and didn't let that sort of hardcore perfectionism sort of tap you down. I don't know what that's called. Like tamper. Is that right? Okay. Thank you. Because I think it's really important. And I was wondering if there were anything that helped you with those ideals, or like, how do you think you learned to do that? Or did you have like any mentors or things that you were doing that supported that vision or supported your process in that time?
Yeah, in the beginning, I had many mentors, and honestly, I feel like mentors are such a vast group of people.
Yeah.
And I want to make that point. It's quite important to have a rounded group of mentors and not idealize like a specific person.
Yeah.
Because of many reasons, two that I can think of are, I think if you're idealizing one specific person, especially as a creative, your art can kind of start to become theirs.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot of differentiating anymore between their work and yours in your own mind.
Right. Through idealization.
Yeah.
I think that's a great distinction.
So that's a problem. But then also like their journey will never be yours. Like you're on two different journeys, and your lived experiences and their lived experiences are so different. Whatever environment they get to create in is probably quite different than yours.
Yeah.
And then if you're kind of comparing yourself to this other human, you don't know their full story even.
Right.
And that can just be really detrimental to your own creativity.
Yeah.
So yeah, to answer your question, I had many mentors that probably didn't even know they were mentors to me in many different arenas of life.
Yeah.
Just people in general doing any kind of business alongside of raising their children were mentors.
Right.
Other mothers were mentors, friends, that had like more, I guess, traditional careers were mentors because that was an experience I couldn't relate to. And sometimes I am a creative photographer, but I run a business, and sometimes you get in this like creative space in your mind, and you're really living there and that feels good. But then it's like, okay, I also have to market my work,
Yeah.
So to have other like professional friends in that kind of area is really helpful too. But yeah, I think it's really important for you to have different people in your life that are attributing towards your success, whether they know it or not.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. I was just going to say that when you're talking about, I totally lost it. Something about like how you were talking about creativity and, your business plan. Oh, I see. Sorry. I had to like backtrack a tiny bit.
It came.
But like, I think that so much of the time, I mean, I hear you talking a lot about finance and financial stability and business plan and like these, and money and value and these pieces. And I think so much of the time with art, and creatives, that's sort of a taboo thing. Like art is on its own.
Yeah.
And money is over here. And may they not be, linked together in some ways. And I think that at least when I was going to school, that was pretty much taught. And I think that it's very interesting to kind of parse through some of these things because there's I see value in creating for yourself through your vision, right? That's what you're talking about. This sort of authentic, where does it come from? It comes from your life, your story. No one else has been in your shoes kind of experience. And to present whatever that is or to create whatever that is. And then also to alongside have the wheel of like marketing and selling and having that sort of be intrinsically a part of what you're doing is I think for a lot of creatives is a very challenging notion and challenging to sort of figure out in some ways.
Definitely. I mean, it's challenging to me still every day.
Yeah, sure.
But you only have the privilege of doing your art if you can afford to live.
Thank you.
And while it does sound really beautiful to never have to monetize your creativity, that's just not the world we live in. And I mean, I am privileged enough that we were able to live on a single income. And even now, like, I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And that does afford me a lot of opportunity to make sure that I am able to do it in a way that I like, that feels good to me.
Right.
But
that aligns with your values.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the work that you're doing.
Right. Because especially like with photography, I have a very specific client. Like, I think it's a little different when you're creating like a piece of art.
Yeah.
Like you've created it. It's of you. You're going to put it out for the world and someone will resonate with it. Right.
Yeah.
But I have to, and I mean, obviously if you're doing commissions, like it's a very similar thing.
Right.
But if you're operating in a different realm where you're just creating, this is my art and here it is, somebody love it, because they will. Obviously, somebody will love your art. But for me, like, I have a person that's hired me to do this, to document their most precious people in their life. And I must market myself authentically so that they know what they're going to receive after we've worked together.
Right.
So if I get caught up on trying to look like somebody else or not marketing myself, that's just not going to work out very well for either of us. They're going to have a different expectation than what I'm going to deliver.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
So, and that, brings back to like the storytelling in your marketing.
Yeah.
If you can show people how, maybe not how, but like your processes, whatever portion of it that you want to share, that you feel comfortable sharing, that just gives them more opportunity to connect with you and your work.
Right.
And to know kind of what to expect or, just to connect on a deeper level, which is, I think, really important. Not that you have to like show them all your cards. Like there are many things you can keep private to yourself for your own personal well-being.
Yeah.
But if you can just let people in, in glimpses of what you do, why you do it, how you do it, that just helps with the human connection. They're connected with your work then.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That's great. Non-squeaky chair to the engineering room. So last segment, anything that you kind of want to talk about or like get into?
Yeah, there is something.
Great. Let's do it. All right. Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger, and we are with Whitney Morales.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
I feel like we've talked a lot about kind of marketing or the journey into, this entrepreneurship role. But I feel like this last year has been a huge transformation for me. And I know, Erica, you and I have had like personal conversations about this, but, it's kind of combining the concepts that we've just talked about in a really beautiful way. Like you are an artist, but you have to market yourself.
Yeah.
Or the money part of it. And this year, or I'd say the last 6 months, I have just continued, and again, I've been doing this for 10 years, but I've just continued to make the decisions that were most aligned with the work that I knew I could deliver best.
Yep.
Because if the work is aligned with me, then I know I can show up well.
Yeah.
So make decisions that had the work aligning with me best.
Yeah.
And letting go of the things that didn't. Because there are, as we know, many creative people out there, and they can fulfill those needs of others.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing somebody a disservice by saying, I'm not the photographer for you, because there are so many beautiful photographers that are the ones for them.
Totally.
And that's who they should be working with. I don't have to like try and morph myself into that person for them.
That's so important. Oh my gosh. Like step back and high five on that one, because I think that that's our, I'm sorry to just take this moment, but like, I think that's so much of what sometimes we do is like, oh, all right, they want this. And so I'm going to change how or adapt. And sometimes it feels like it's a growth thing, and you can like go, yeah, all right, maybe that can align with me. But other times it's so outside of where our comfort zone is that, or what we're able to do, that it really takes us off track.
Yeah.
In some ways. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because I think that's a really important distinction, that to find that tuning fork again, like what is going to be okay for you.
Yeah. And so like in denying some work, and honestly, I've had a lot of experiences on the other end too. There's been a lot of things in the last year that I've tried, as I'm going to try this and see how it feels. Cool. Is this going to fit well?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to figure out, is this something that feels uncomfortable because it is a growth moment, as you were saying, or because it doesn't fit?
Right.
Like you have to figure that out. And sometimes the only way you can figure that out is through trying.
Yeah.
But, try it, give yourself the opportunity to reflect on that. and make a decision that aligns well with you in the future, like next time this comes up.
Right. Future Whitney.
Yeah. But I guess the biggest revelation I've had in the last year is, just not saying yes to everything, like with a scarcity mindset, like I must say yes to this opportunity.
Which is hard.
It really is. But that also gives you the opportunity to show your best work then. Focus on your best work.
Yeah.
And when you're showing and focusing on your best work, the opportunities will keep coming in because people are connecting with you. People are finding they want what you have to offer. But if you're kind of always doing different things to, make the money or, I don't know, keep busy, whatever it is, people are never really seeing what you truly have to offer.
Yeah.
They're seeing you through the lens of, what this person requested.
Right. And it's shifting what you're promoting, creating. It's shifting your vision that you're putting out there then.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And, you do have to remain in control of that. You're the only one that can control that.
And that's really hard. It's hard to make those decisions because I think that so many of us artists and creatives, or anyone really, right? This is what this is about, is that we have varied interests and want to try things out, but remove the reflection part about it and decision making then, which is partial of that full circle that you need to kind of make forward momentum in your sitting interest.
Yeah.
Right? Did that make sense?
Yeah, to me.
Okay.
But then another thing, that's just kind of along this evolution of me figuring out how to do my best work, is that prioritizing rest as like actually part of your work. Like your rest time is as valuable as your production time. So I would say...
Why do you think that is?
Or I will tell you.
All right, good. Do it.
That has transformed my last, I would say, year of work. For me specifically, I'm an entrepreneur. My kids are now all in school, all three of them. So I have these days. This is my first time in 10 years. I have these hours of days that I could just grind away at work if I wanted to do that. And I did a little bit of that last year, and it felt so hard and bad. And like I was making more money than I ever did, but it wasn't ever fulfilling because I wasn't resting.
Yeah.
And so I would say 9 months ago, I started prioritizing rest and prioritizing self and connecting more with me, which, has required a lot of new boundaries that I've never set for myself before. To just carve out that time and space and hold to it.
Yeah.
Because it's in that rest that's where your creativity comes. It just shines brightly through. When you allow yourself chunks of rest, the inspiration will just start flowing and you will work with ease. You will work with beauty. And that's the dream, Like that's, I think, what we're all trying to acquire here. Like if you can, as creatives, or honestly, I've been in this role for so long that I can't know if it translates, but I hope it translates to almost every career if you're actually like looking for a whole balanced life.
Yeah.
To just work with a flow of ease.
Yeah.
Where your work gets aligned with who you are and whatever like beauty you want to put out there.
Right.
And I say beauty, but like beauty means so like that's a large covering word.
Yeah.
Like, my husband, he does all of our home renovations and they are beautiful, but it's quite a different line of work, you know?
Right.
But beauty, like take that in whatever career path you're in right now. Like there is beauty in your work, whatever it is, you're fulfilling a need. And if you can feel really fulfilled by that too, like that's a beautiful existence, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So if you're allowing yourself to rest, and like as creatives, I keep saying that, but I think to like engineers too, like there's so much creativity in that job. Like,
yeah.
I
mean, I think we're talking about creatives in a very generalized way.
Yeah.
In that it's all people.
Yeah.
Like I think that's what's happening. Like
Yeah.
we keep trying to identify it, but it's like all the people,
Yeah.
everybody, because everybody's making these creative decisions. What are some of the tools that you use to find those rest that feels? Because I think sometimes people rest or think about rest as like either napping or sleeping. But we're talking about sort of like a rejuvenating periods of time, right? Like that there's a value within this empty experience or something. Like,
yeah. For me, rest is often done in my garden.
Yeah.
Tending to something a little more mindlessly, but
mindlessly, that's a great word for it.
Yeah, and like my garden isn't this perfect looking thing, but it feels really perfect for me.
Yeah.
And that's all it has to do. That's its only job. I plant a garden so I can work in it during my busy season because thankfully they align.
Yeah.
And its sole purpose is for me to be able to walk out and stand in there and pick flowers if I want. Currently, I've been gathering a lot of seeds, just whatever it is. Some years it's more vegetable related. Some years it's more flower related. But that garden, it's work in its own, but it's a different kind of work for me.
Yeah.
It's more mindless for me. Like I can go through the motions and do things that just feel fulfilling.
And intuitive.
Yeah. And that's where my thoughts get going on, my greater, I don't know, work things or even family things.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And I mean, even for me too, like being around water, journaling, biking, hiking, anything. And I think, yeah, you are right. There are these kind of like or ideas that we all have in mind when we think of rest, but that is all very specific to you as a human.
Right.
What feels restful to you? Like some people might think, well, gardening, that's a lot of work. That's not restful, but it's not working my brain. You know, like it's not challenging me in that way. And it gives me some physical output, which feels good. Because like my job, there's a lot of computer work, and to be able to like physically do something, it might seem like, hey, Whitney, that's not resting. But for me, it's resting my brain. It's resting all of those requirements of me in my family life and my work life. And that's just my space to be just me.
Yeah. And giving back. It's giving back to you then. It's filling you up.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of it. And all the things that you mentioned are all things that you do outside.
That's why winter's really, really hard.
Okay.
I think for a lot of us, we get that.
I think so
too. Support in nature. And
right.
I guess I just need to bundle up more and get out more. But I keep saying I try.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a, again, it's so good to identify some of these things that are useful tools for us because I think you're right. I think a lot of people have trouble with like, oh my gosh, winter's almost gone or winter's almost here. Then then maybe it is about planning in time that your mind can wander in places. And then what does it look like? Where can you go and what can you do that will fill up that self?
Yeah. And I think it's also fun to like allow yourself to be creative in a vastly different way than, your career is.
Oh, yeah.
And like that can be really freeing and really restful.
Yeah, I think cooking is like that for people.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know how I made this, but I added thyme this time, and then I bought this great spice that I found at the farmer's market that, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's another like creative outlet that there's no like, nobody needs it to be good in the end. Like you're hoping it can at least be edible with food, but like you don't need for it to please. Oh gosh, I mean, with 3 kids, my meals never please everybody, but you don't. It's just fulfilling in the act of doing. And I'm sure most of the time it's at least edible, and sometimes it's mind blowing.
Yeah,
and just accepting that whole line of creative process.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that this the tone of this interview feels very, or I don't know, I have trouble calling it an interview even because it feels more like conversation, but feels very like pleasing. Like there's an element of even like how you're sitting and we're talking together that there's this wellness, like a drive for creating wellness for yourself. And by doing that, it allows and opens up you to be more creative, more present with yourself, more present with your family, more present with your clients. That it's this circle, like like you said, being near water is one of the things that fills you up. It's almost like a drop in the water of you. And then the circles concentric circles that come out from that as a ripple effect then that affects all areas of your life. And that's something that's so important to you that you focus on it so that it does happen. And that's such a there's such clarity within that process. And that's really, I think that's really hard to do and to sustain. And it's really quite lovely to be witness to, I guess, and to be inspired by and with.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I think also like there are certain times in your life where you're able to create that for yourself. And then hopefully that practice kind of carries through different more challenging times of life. I'm just thinking like I had 3 kids all within 4 years.
Wow.
And these last 2 years have been a whole new experience for me. Like this is a totally different version of me than 5 years ago even.
Sure.
And I think if you have the space to set some of those foundational things in your life, that they do carry you through the harder times. But, that's not always possible. And sometimes you are just in there grinding away.
Yeah.
Trying to get through. But then hopefully there's a break, there's a pause, there's a moment for you to regroup, or you just choose that,
Right.
And honestly, we've gone without a lot of things as a choice to create that space, for both my husband and I.
Yeah.
Because, it's about choosing. And sometimes things are situational and you don't have that choice. But I think for most of us, that's not a lifelong experience.
Right. It's acute situations that then you have to manage and work through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or you get through it and you're like, I'm never doing that again. What can I do to like never be that shell of me, that shell of who I was? I think for me, that's what it was, growing kids, and then they become a little more independent. I realize I've been lost. Like, who am I? How do I fit in to all of this? Especially now with them all just going away. It's just me. It's just me. Like I've never had this. And so it is, I'm grateful for this time of my life that I do get to establish those things.
Right.
And, I'm sure there'll be years that are challenging again. We'll have 3 teenagers at the same time. So that might be a different vibe. You might get a different version of me at that time. But I am hopeful that if I, set some of these boundaries for myself and work through some of these practices and, that they'll help carry through whatever lies next, because we know life is always kind of filled with ups and downs.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's there's so many studies done on how and what you do in that stasis to foundationally support yourself. Mm-hmm. Because when things inevitably go bad, go wrong, feels crappy, you're like low and dark or whatever, those are the pieces that are going to help create that sustainability and suspend you, to be able to move through whatever it is a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So, gosh, thank you so much for talking through so much of that with us. It's really great. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I hope it resonates, or maybe some of it absolutely won't. And that's probably an okay thing too.
Yeah, we all give and take, what rises to the surface, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But thank you so much. And if people wanted to get a hold of you, where could they find you?
I would say my most up-to-date life of work is at whitneymorales.com is my website. And then on social media, I have Facebook. I'm definitely more active on Instagram. So that's Whitney Morales Photography on Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Mm. Thank you so much for being here. And
thank you.
It's really lovely to be a part of hearing about your processes and thoughts about how you talk about your work, share your work and yourself. And we're all better for it. So,
well, thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Whitney. Huge thanks to Mead Public Library, the fantastic Melissa Prentice, Josh Littner, Annalisa Finca, the radio committee, our amazing engineer, John Tully, and for the title, Photo and Fabulous, theme music composed and performed by Cooper Deers.
In the Act is produced in the studios at Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. More information on the web at meadpl.org.